I think it's pretty common to mix a little bit of tobacco with your bud. People do it in a lot of places. It's common all around the world. I think here in the States, like the most common instance of it is people smoking blunts. They just wrap their bud in a tobacco leaf essentially. And there's not really like a ton of tobacco. Most people aren't putting like the actual tobacco. They just bust it open and dump that out on the ground and put bud in it. But it is still common to smoke a little bit of tobacco with your bud. People know about like spliffs and things like that. Well, also there's other ways to do it, and people are smoking tobacco with their bud in bowls. And I've had some experience with this. You've heard me talk a lot about tobacco. I hate it. I'm never like smoking my weed thinking, this needs something, you know? I'm not like, oh man, the bud is good, but like if only there was something else. But I've experimented with some things. I think people have heard of things like poppers or mole bowls, chops or dirty bowls or mokes. They have a lot of names for it. I think dirty bowls is a funny name. People call mixing tobacco and weed in your bowl a dirty bowl, and some people are smoking dirty bowls out of literal dirty bowls, which honestly should be called a disgusting bowl, because what are you doing? But one summer years ago, I smoked a ton of mole bowls and I just couldn't stop doing it, and I was doing it a bunch, and I had to just quit cold turkey because I found myself just doing weird stuff. So a mole bowl, when I was doing these, I would take a bong typically, and I would just pack the bowl about 50-60% weed and like the rest tobacco, maybe half and half. But I would usually just put a little bit in, and then I would put the top layer of just tobacco. I had some friends visiting me when I lived in Colorado, and I think they both smoked cigarettes, and they were into doing mole bowls at the time. It was a thing. I don't know if they just heard about it and they were teaching me, but one summer I just did like a ton of mole bowls, and I kind of regret it. But you know, I did them, so I'm here to tell you why I don't do them anymore. But we would just take these bowls, put a little bit of tobacco on top, and tobacco burns a little bit hotter, so you shred through the bowl quicker. Like I was packing fatter bowls than I would normally pack, and I would burn through it quicker because the tobacco burned a little bit hotter. That was the part that intrigued me. They were like, oh yeah, you could take even bigger hits because it's gonna burn faster. So I started doing what my friends were doing that were visiting. I was like, all right, you know, I'm bored. I'll try something new. And we would just rip these massive bowls of like mostly weed, a little bit of tobacco. Sometimes they were half and half. Mine were usually more weed because I was just like, I don't really like tobacco. But they're like, nah, dude, trust me, you gotta do it. It makes it hit so hard. And if you've never done it, there's like a certain head rush that you get from the nicotine. First off, I don't recommend it, guys. Before we get into it, I really don't recommend it. Don't do it. Tobacco's bad. And even doing this kind of hit like mole bowls, I think is specifically bad because you're taking such a big hit of tobacco and you're getting it with weed. You're mixing it. I don't think it's bad for the weed, but I think the tobacco aspect, like I've heard from so many people, they've seen somebody or they themselves have had a seizure after taking a mole bowl or a chop. And I was looking into this a little bit before the video, like there's a lot of connections between tobacco and seizures and epilepsy even. And I've seen some stories and some videos about like CBD and weed in general helping people with seizures, but I don't think it balances itself out in this situation. And I've heard so many reports of people saying they've seen someone or they've had a seizure from doing this. So first off, don't ruin your weed with tobacco. Don't start getting addicted to getting high. Don't add the addictive element in there and now you got to do both. But this is what happened when I did it. So I mentioned earlier, I would typically take like a bigger rip than I normally would. I was trying to like push the limits on taking bigger rips. This is around when I first started experimenting with hot water and different styles of pieces. I was trying to push the limits on what my lungs could do. But one thing I noticed, like the first couple of times, you get a head rush from smoking tobacco, especially if you've never like smoked it or you don't smoke it a lot. If it's not something you're not addicted to cigarettes and smoking it every day, if you take a hit out of it every now and then, you get like a noticeable head rush. I don't like it that much. It's kind of weird. It's not a good one. It's not as fun or it's not as soothing to me as being high is. But when I would take these fat rips with the tobacco and I get that head rush, I get a nice rush from just the hit itself, the hit of weed or whatever. And it would usually be a little bit more weed than I would pack and then a little bit of tobacco to sweeten the deal. But a lot of times I would take a big old rip and I would just have to lay on the floor for like a minute. And I couldn't do anything but lay there. And I'm just like, it's like when everything blurs around you, right? Everything freezes, everything slows down. You're caught, bro. You're stuck there. You can't do anything but just like chill for a minute. Like it would put me down for like a minute. I would have to lay there. And like the first couple, I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. And then after a while, I was just like, no, I literally have to do this every time I take a hit. I just have to lay here and kind of feel like poop for a little bit. Like, I don't know. It's not a great feeling after a while. Some people like that. Some people, oh my God, I can't wait to take that massive hit and have that head rush and just chill. I don't like it. It's bad. And you're getting a ton of nicotine. Depending on how you're hitting it, you can obviously pack more or less, but you're just getting a big blast of nicotine. And my friends only stayed for like a week or so. We were doing this for maybe like 5 or 6 days, and they left, but I kept doing it. They left some cigarettes behind for me to continue to do mole bowls. I think I even had like some blunts, and I was experimenting with the difference of tobacco in the blunts and out of the cigarettes. But like after a while, I'm like, I'm just literally smoking tobacco every day. I'm adding it into my bowl hits to make them a little bit bigger, and then I'm getting this weird head rush that causes me to lay down on the floor for a few minutes. I like took a step back and I was analyzing the situation. I was like, 2 weeks ago I was just happy I was getting high, smoking weed, doing dabs, doing this and that. And now I'm smoking tobacco every day. What am I doing? But I still like the aspect of I could take like a big rip out of it. So I don't know if you remember a story I told a while ago about having like a ton of hash, having too much hash. I bought a lot of this, and I think it was shortly after the Mole Bowl series for me, or like my summer of doing Mole Bowls, because I remember like quitting doing the tobacco hits for like a little while, and then eventually I was like, I still want to do massive rips, and I would buy like bubble hash, or I would get keef and I would leave it out and I would get it really dry because that burns hotter. And like I would do like a similar thing that I was doing with the mole bowls, where I was just sweetening the bowl a little bit, but I would sweeten it with hash or keef or something like that, but like specifically like really dry stuff that was gonna burn hotter than the weed was. So I still like doing those big like monster hits. Like you can sort of get like a huge hit out of just flower itself, but when you start adding in keef and hash, even the wax sometimes can do it. But if you overdo it, it's not that great. But just for I don't even know, like for however long it took me to go through that jar, I would just put like nugs in my grinder, and then I'd fill in all the gaps with like bubble hash, and I would just start grinding it up, grind it all up together. You get this nice like consistency of like fluffy keefy bud, and that would just burn so easy. So I later switched to doing stuff like that when I wanted to take like those big monster hits, because those hits too, I wouldn't really need to lay down on the floor like I would with the mobile or the chop, but it would just be like a bigger hit than I could take on just flour alone. Those are the hits where you just kind of have to sit there and like gather your thoughts for a moment. Either way, moral of the story is don't smoke tobacco with your weed. It ultimately ruins it, and then you're just adding this whole addictive element to the weed smoking that you're doing. It really does not make it better. Trust me. It makes it worse overall, and if you plan to do it for a long time, you're just gonna make that way worse. Tobacco sucks. Stop smoking dirt pickles. Blunts are trash. People are probably doing digital mole bowls right now, doing a blinker off a Mario Kart and some nicotine pen. If you're doing that, just stop, bro. Just quit. You've already ruined smoking for yourself. Anyway, follow me on Twitch. I go live after 9 p.m. Eastern for a smoke sesh. If you have Amazon Prime, you can give me that Jeff Bezos weed money by subscribing to my Twitch for free with your Amazon Prime. And if you didn't see that video the time that I had too much hash, check it out. It's a dang old good time, and there was a lot of hash. It was a lot. Have a lit day, my dudes.